Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What. Today I've got Helen Murphy on and she's the co-founder at Opply. Hi Helen.
Hi Daniel, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
All good, thank you. Always busy in the tech world.
Yeah, I'm sure. Helen, do you want to jump straight in and tell everyone a bit about what you do?
Of course. So currently, as you said, I'm the co-founder of a company called Opply. My day-to-day job is the CEO of the company. And what Opply does is we automate supply chains for raw ingredients. So that's anything from if you need, say, red pepper paste to we get some really obscure ones, like very pasteurized soy milk. And so we source those raw ingredients for food and drinks brands worldwide.
This is really cool. I'm a little bit geeky. I kind of like ops businesses and stuff like that, and I find this
Nice.
really interesting. So have you seen a huge surge in demand for these kind of things? With the rise of e-commerce and people starting their own brands, and maybe in their kitchens they started making jams or something, and it's grown into a business. Have you seen this kind of demand for what you're doing grow?
Yeah, massively. So there's a million new businesses created in this space every single year. And so that growth rate is just crazy. And it only accelerated during COVID because people had time to sit at home and actually create these businesses, which often start as side hustles, but then actually get established into bigger and bigger businesses. And then obviously, I've been in e-commerce pretty much my entire career. And you just see obviously it becoming part of everyone's daily life. And so when I remember like 6, 7 years ago, where e-commerce may have been at max 5% of our sales, and now it sits at 20, 30% of sales.
Wow.
So these are just becoming really big markets.
I think a really good example of this is not necessarily, it's not for human consumption, but it's Pets Purist, a little company that was started up north. And they basically create dog treats really, but it's all natural. So I'd imagine they had a real headache trying to find ingredients and suppliers. And I think a business like yours would make that whole process a lot easier, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we actually work with some pets brands as well, because there's a general trend in pet care to move towards more natural ingredients
Mm.
for your animals and almost treat them as though you would treat yourself.
Again, I think this is really cool, but how did you end up in this?
Yeah. And I think always an interesting one to think back because I don't think you ever really think about it while you're doing it.
Mm.
And so I've had probably the most random career you could think of. So started off as a mechanical engineer, working on everything from mascara wands to jet engines, and decided that
Wow.
was
That is
not.
unbelievably cool. But also, my co-host, who can't be here today, is a mechanical engineer, and he will be gutted he's missed this one.
Sorry. And my co-founder is actually also a mechanical engineer.
How
So
cool.
we can definitely chat about that. And I'm sure they may be able to say it as well about how it's it's a very interesting world, but it can be quite detail orientated, quite small scale. So you could be working on something like a jet plane, but you're working on like the angle of a bolt of a wing of a plane. Um, and I'm quite a big picture person a lot of the
Mm.
time. And so after that, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I ran away to Vancouver to be a baker. Um,
How cool.
we didn't realize at the time, but it's actually become our hiring strategy to bribe people with cakes. But, um, and yeah, so I'm always attached to some level of baked good. Um, Maybe that's why we started. That probably plays into why we actually started a food and drinks service as well.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think I've always like chased culture, I guess, in companies, and that's one thing that we did from day one at Opply. Like our team is our everything, and I think I've seen that through many, many great companies. So started my career at P&G, where where I was working in the sales team and predominantly across quite a few accounts, but then started to get more and more into e-commerce. Um, And even though I think you hear it a lot in the news and in different forums about obviously the rise of startups and how everyone should work for startups and like no one should work for corporates. And I'm probably actually quite a big advocate for both, because I had some of my best years at P&G, and like you are surrounded by people who can just teach you so much, and you are the learning and the growth that you get there, and the people that you are surrounded by, you're supported no matter what. And I think at the start of a career, that was an amazing thing to have. And I can go into the rest of management consulting, fintech, etc., and what got me here. But
yeah,
grounding has always been in consumer goods and e-commerce.
wow. I mean, I know what you're saying about big corporates. I've done the same. I've worked in big corporates, and they are a good place to get I would say, a really good understanding of how a business should run. Workflows are important, processes are important. To make a big company work, all the cogs have to go in the same direction. But I struggled personally to be sort of confined in that environment where, you had to follow certain rules, certain procedures. And it's interesting to hear you say, being big picture. Did you ever kind of struggle with that, having to follow certain rules and do certain things a certain way?
Oh, for sure. Mm-hmm. So I'm quite a big risk taker. So in life, I think I just love that side of it where you don't always know what's going to happen. And so I think I probably got a different spin of the coin because I was incredibly lucky with the managers I had, where I was allowed to spread my wings almost in new divisions and new concepts and very creative things within a corporate, which I know not a lot of people get. But I think the biggest thing for me was the slowness of it all. I think if you're quite innovative and you're quite fast thinking as well, I don't know anyone who wouldn't get frustrated at the slow speed of like decision making, of innovation and things like that. So I think
100%.
Different aspects, but yeah.
100%. And it's, like you say, getting sign off for things and, we're not really sure about that, needs to go to PR to be checked, or that needs to, and you're like, oh, okay. Well, by the time you do that, that's it. It's done anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've moved on from what you were doing there to how did you decide to start Opply? Like, what was that process?
Yeah. So I think a big aspect is, I've always kind of had side hustles and my side hustles were always actually in consumer goods. So whether it was like creating a new subscription box or a sparkly dog collar company or whatever that was, doing very random things. And every time when I did that, it was always supply chain, which is the hardest part of my day. And I don't think we actually did this when we first started. We interviewed hundreds of founders and we were just like very open, like, what's the toughest part of your day? Like, what would you most like help with? And I don't think I've ever been ranted at more in my life about supply chain. So I knew it was a very personal issue for me, and I'd seen it in both small company, my own companies, big companies as well. And then when you actually speak to your customers directly and they're just like banging their head against a wall, you kind of know you have a problem then.
Yeah, I mean, so kind of break down the problems for me. I haven't ever started a product or e-commerce business in that sense. So what were the difficulties that these SMEs and founders were facing?
Yeah, so there tends to be three main problems. The first is sourcing. So when you first start a product, and let's go down the route of, I was going to go down the sparkly dog collar route because I know that very explicitly. But say you're starting a non-alcoholic beer, very trendy right now, and hopefully will remain as one as well. But say you're starting that company and that product has like 15 ingredients in there. And so you could have everything that would always obviously be a composite of that. How many people can you imagine would be an expert in sourcing those particular set of ingredients worldwide?
Yeah, I mean, not a lot, I guess.
Really not many. And so a lot of people specialize in supply chain in quite specific ingredients. So they may specialize in oils, in flours, maybe in botanicals, whatever that is. So then when you combine all of these together, there's very, very few people that are true experts. And then try and get them to come and work for your freshly started startup in this space, you've got no chance. So these companies generally have like amazing like marketeers, strategists, ops people at their helm. But then when it comes to supply, like it's really hard to get that talent, particularly in like sourcing and managing suppliers.
Okay, so then that's where Opply comes in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we do it from start to end, where we've built now the world's biggest database in our space and the world's biggest network now of raw ingredient suppliers. So we basically have that combined knowledge within our tech space. And so we can match people and businesses exactly to the ingredients that they need and to very specific specifications. And then they can manage all of this through the platform. They can then finance those products through the platform. So we effectively become their supply team for them.
Wow, this is brilliant. I can't believe no one's done this before. It's a really, really good idea.
I think it's always like, it's such a kind of complicated, fragmented, kind of old school industry that it's almost like you have to chip away at it like a bit at a time. And this is always the case in marketplaces, where if you think of the biggest marketplaces like Amazon and Etsy and ones like that, they're all like business to consumer. And they've all been established over the last 20, 30 years. And now there's this evolution into business to business. But obviously that has only really happened relatively recently, the tech angle of that. So it feels like if you look out there, I'm in a founder group of all B2B marketplace founders. And you see that there's a new one being added every day because it's just this emerging industry as well.
That's brilliant. I think it's very cool. Let's go back a little bit. Did you go to university?
I did go to university.
Okay, what did you study?
I studied engineering.
Oh, okay, of course, yes, because you're a mechanical engineer. You would need that degree. We always ask if you go to university because it's interesting to get the point of view is, did you value your time at university?
Yeah, so I think I definitely did. And I actually do get asked that question a lot, and sometimes in a different context. So within our world right now, it's you'll see a lot of the headlines about like the diversity measures, I guess, in our world. And so I grew up in like inner city Manchester, went to very average state school. And so for me, in my family, like university was like the pinnacle. Like if we got into university, it was like our whole family threw like this huge party, and it was they felt like you'd maybe achieve something that they'd really supported you to do so. So I think that's when university for me like probably actually meant a lot more, because it was kind of, I was hoping I was making my family proud by doing that. I got a bit emotional then, I don't know why. And so I think my actual experience there, obviously I do things now like very loosely related to my degree.
Sure.
But I think the biggest one was I actually don't think at 18 I was ready to adult yet. Where it gave me the space to like become an adult and like to understand who I was, without the pressure, even though there was a lot of pressure obviously, but without the pressure of a lot of the other aspects that you get after uni. So yeah, I think for me it was a very good experience, but I think it's so like person by person and what's important to them and what they've achieved already and how they want to factor their life as well.
It's a really good point, not one we sort of talked about actually a lot on the podcast. So it's more of an experience thing you value opposed to the actual degree.
I think so. And then there's a really random one, which is, so when I've worked in North America, there is still such a dependence on degrees.
Really?
Yeah, so I think in the UK we're a bit more forward thinking here, where, for example, one of my best friends works for Multiverse,
Hmm.
um, and it's amazing when we talk about it, like it's kind of a semi-university experience where you're an apprentice and in kind of tech fields or other fields like that. So it feels like we're very forward thinking as a country, but I actually don't think that's the case in a lot of other countries. So in a weird way, it future proofed me when I went internationally with my career as well.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. But as a founder now and somebody that's probably hired or hiring people, do you look at somebody's CV and go, well, they went to university and put them above someone that didn't go to university?
We definitely don't know. So we actually have a few in our team who didn't. And this is super important for me because I think everyone gets given different opportunities, and we hire people based on the skills that they exhibit in front of us. And I don't, as I say, my university experience was that it was an experience, but hands down, from a work skills point of view, my working life and my career life has brought so much more than that. So I think, yeah, we always base it on skill based and what we see in front of us, and we blind CV as well. So we get someone who screens the CV. So I actually don't know when they come for interview if they've been to university or not.
Okay, that's interesting. And that's called blind CVs, right?
Yeah, so you kind
Okay.
of you blank out the CV, so you can't have things that would technically bias you.
Oh, that's really interesting. So being someone that's in the position of and hiring people, what is something that usually stands out to you where you go, actually, I'd really love this person to come and work at my company?
Yeah. We talk about this one a lot because we always talk. There's probably a few things, and I think this obviously varies a lot by different companies. But I think there's some really key characteristics. One is like proactivity and adaptability. Like if someone just like, oh, we call it a bit of like a dog with a bone characteristic.
Hmm.
They always want to do the best of their ability. They're pretty relentless at getting things done, rather than, I guess, giving up at the first hurdle. I think that's a really important one, and often that tenacity actually comes from varied backgrounds, by getting that. And then another one is like we always want people who have each other's backs. Like we actually asked this of some of our customers, like how they would describe our team, and the number one characteristic that came back was kind.
Mm.
And so we always say it's like you should challenge and inspire and push, but do it in a very kind way, because that's what people remember about you.
It sounds like there's quite a big opportunity within this world, then the B2B businesses, and specifically, I want to talk about the supply chain world. It sounds like if there's somebody listening to this thinking, actually, this is quite interesting, there's a lot of
Yeah.
opportunity about to come up in this space. Is that a fair sort of assumption?
Oh, massive, huge investment into it as well. So if they're thinking of that space.
Okay, interesting. And is there anything maybe they should look at to specialize in to go into supply chain?
Yeah. So I think if you break supply chain down, it generally breaks into a few aspects. So there's core procurement, which is like the buying and selling of goods.
Hmm.
Then there's things like contract negotiations. So that's like agreeing these negotiations with different suppliers and partners, and that includes partnerships. And then there's the food science side of it, which is looking into, or just general like material science or raw material science. And like we've got an amazing food scientist on our team who just can tell you everything about seaweed you could ever need to know. Um, and and then the final side is logistics. So we obviously hear this a lot in the news, but that moving of goods worldwide is something which disrupts our global economy. And so I think if you specialize in any of these, it's a very sought after skill, I would say. Like there's a massive labor shortage in supply chain, because it just doesn't seem to be what people want to go into now, even though it's like kind of the backbone of a lot of things.
Yeah, I have to admit, even at school and outside, I think I know one person that works in sort of food science, not even, specifying in the logistics side or anything like that, but it just doesn't get talked about, I don't think.
No, agreed. And it's like, even when you say it to someone asks you what you do, I'm normally just like, oh, we buy onions. Because it's so, and it's so actually technically, like, as I say, complicated in the background. That the skills that you get from this industry is insane, actually. And because there's so much tech being applied to it right now, the tech that is being used in supply chain is genuinely world class. Like we get approached all the time by companies in other industries that are trying to like figure out how we do our matching technology, like how we match with different suppliers. I'm sure the dating industry would love to know this. And so it's so applicable to so many different industries. It's such a good place to start.
No, it's really, really great point. But for you, what's been the biggest positive of starting this company and going on this journey?
Yeah. I'll probably I don't know whether this is quite a cheesy answer, but it's genuinely, when you like dream about starting a company and growing it, you always, I think about who your team will be or what it will become. And I think now seeing that team on the ground, and like I'm sat next to them and they're working and they'll get a really big achievement or something will happen. And it's just like, it almost feels like you've created this new family and you've brought all these people together. And so I think sometimes I sit back and it's like a proud parent.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably every single day I get a feeling like that when something happens.
That's very cool. And then on the flip side of that, what's been the biggest challenge you faced so far?
Yeah. Oh, where do I start on this? So yeah, obviously you speak to other people in startups. So I think that's actually the best thing about startups is if you love a challenge, and yeah, that a kind of characteristic of you just want to solve, like no matter what, you just want to solve. Because I would say I probably have like 5 different challenges every day. But I'd say the biggest one has probably been understanding when to build and when to grow. Because you'll see this obviously in the current market we're heading towards a potential recession. And so there's different money on the ground, different labor, different expenses for everyone. And it's a time like this where so many companies are peeling back on the money they're investing. And they're like lowering their expenses and things like that. And it's almost like knowing then, do we keep building or do we just go for growth? And you're constantly trying to balance that in a startup.
Yeah, no, and it must be incredibly hard to sort of forecast going into potentially a recession as well.
Yeah, and obviously we can kind of see it, right? Because we see like global trends happening across like supply chain and logistics and what's going on, but there's so many people that are going to be affected by this, that yeah, it just feels like if help at all, where we get better ingredients faster to people, so the cost of groceries goes down, or whatever that is. It just feels like this industry as a whole just needs to help, even going into this next phase of the economy as well.
Sure. So what does the next couple of years look like for Opply?
Yeah. So next couple of years is we're currently expanding into Europe and the US. And so we'll be building out our infrastructure and our team behind that. And that is, so it's really focusing on getting really strong relationships with our customers, that they trust us implicitly to run their entire supply chain, and building the technology behind that so it fully automates their day-to-day. So we can get to the point where we have customers who absolutely love us and they have a fully automated supply chain. That will be the day I wake up happy.
Yeah, very cool, girl. And would you still go into this industry knowing everything you know now?
Yes. So I think the consumer goods industry will always be kind of where my heart is. Because I love, just like seeing something physical.
Mm.
It feels that you can conceive it and be there. And I think, yeah, I think I would, because it's genuinely been, I don't think I've ever learned more than I have in my entire life by doing this. And I've been at places longer, I've done different things, but the learning curve on this, and I actually got told this by a mentor a while ago, where she was like, you will never learn as much as you can here. And the tenacity you build is beyond.
Well, Helen, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you this afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you and your company?
Yeah, so if anyone wants to reach out to me, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. So Helen Murphy at Opply, and then our website is opply.com, Opply.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Daniel.